Now we turn to some facts and context about one of America's fault lines after this weekend's shooting. How we all view immigration. Our views come from experience, of course, from our feelings, from words, which is why battles over how to handle immigration often turn on the words we use: undocumented versus illegal, asylum versus anchor baby. Some words can be offensive because they are dehumanizing or worse. Now, Donald Trump's adopted the inflammatory language of invasion, and the El Paso shooter echoed that very language from Trump, as the New York Times reports, which has some Trump allies pushing back.
If you use the term as an invasion, that's not anti-Hispanic, it's a fact. If the Russians were coming through Alaska, through Canada, the president would be using the same language.
The primary definition of invasion is a foreign military invading. That's why it sounds ominous. So the Russian or Mexican military crossing the border would be a traditional invasion. Now, the word also refers to a large number of people entering a place. You can find dictionary examples of an invasion of fans at a stadium. In fact, people are looking up these very words right now. Invasions in the top 20 most searched words today at Merriam-Webster's website. Racism and fascism are in the top 5 for the week. So a lot of people are thinking about what these words mean. But there is more to the whole answer than just stopping at the dictionary definition. The El Paso shooter explicitly cited a white nationalist dogma, the replacement theory, that argues immigrant invaders are replacing basically white people in the West. Now, that doesn't mean everyone who ever picks the word invasion in a sentence intentionally means it that way. But this week, as Trump and his defenders publicly double down on invasion in this news cycle, it does mean they're on notice. The killer meant those words that way. And he is echoing a line of other mass shooters who cited the same replacement theory. So word 1, invasion. Word 2, replace. If replace rings a vague, sinister bell, well, that may be because of Charlottesville, where, of course, Trump proclaimed good people on both sides, because it was there in Charlottesville that white nationalists openly marched against racial minorities and against Jews and chanted about not being replaced.
Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us! Jews will not replace us!
That's America. Replace is also a word with a normal dictionary definition. Most people use the word replace in normal, typical ways. But even in lawful and nonviolent political discourse, that word's increasingly invoked in the specific political context that views immigration as a zero-sum threat.
Democrats know if they keep up the flood of illegals into the country, they can eventually turn it into a flood of voters for them. Their political success does not depend on good policies, but on demographic replacement.
Democrats who want to replace you, the American voters, with newly amnestied citizens and an ever-increasing number of chain migrants.
We've seen this in Europe. We're seeing it here, and they are attempting to replace us.
Attempting to replace us. Now, there are plenty of legitimate, peaceful arguments for limiting immigration. As we've noted on this program before, most countries with net positive migration have rules limiting it. But how you do it matters. How you talk about it matters. And how you talk about it, especially if you have authority, a megaphone, or power, can shape whether our nation sees this as another policy to be discussed and peacefully decided, or as something more akin to a war footing.
It's called an invasion, and thank God we have a president that will stand up to an invasion like this.
I don't care what the fake media says, that's an invasion of our country.
There's an invasion by foreigners into their country.
We have right now an invasion. If you look at what's going on with the caravans, it's an invasion.
They're just streaming across. This is a flat-out invasion.
Stop this onslaught, this invasion into our country.
This invasion. We need more than simplistic, politicized, and even hateful rhetoric right now. And we probably need more than just good faith criticism of that rhetoric. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.